We turn now to Puerto Rico, where the 70th anniversary of the Ponce Massacre has passed. On March 21st, 1937, 19 people were killed and more than 100 wounded when police opened fire on a demonstration calling for independence from the United States. The day is considered a defining event in Puerto Rico's history of struggle against U.S. domination.
Juan Manuel Garcia Paslacua is a well-known Puerto Rican attorney, radio host, and political analyst. He joins us now on the line from Puerto Rico. Welcome to Democracy Now!, Juan Manuel.
It's a pleasure, Amy.
Can you talk about the significance of this date, of March 21st, yesterday, in fact?
It is no coincidence that on the date of the commemoration of the abolition of our slavery and of the Ponce Massacre that intended to celebrate it, precisely today, the American Congress takes up at a hearing in an hour what to do with the 8 million Puerto Ricans. And I am sure Juan will know that in my column today in El Vocero here, I have requested that they hear him and that he should send all members of the committee a copy of his brilliant book, Harvest of Empire, that explains it all. So I'm very glad to be with you today, and don't forget to tune in at 10 o'clock, because the Congress, for the first time in 107 years, is going to listen to the diaspora.
Well, Juan Manuel, for many Americans who don't know anything about the Ponce Massacre, it would be good to sort of give it the framework of what happened. Clearly, I think Albizu Campos, the great nationalist leader, had just been sentenced to prison on sedition charges for 10 years in prison. And this protest was actually a protest to free Albizu, wasn't it?
Well, the whole demonstration was directed at the commemoration of the abolition of slavery, and one of the examples that slavery had continued after its abolition was precisely that Pedro Albizu Campos was imprisoned by the United States. The important thing about this celebration, commemoration, however you want to call it, is that the governor, Blanton Winship, was the one that ordered the massacre, the American governor, who was a military governor with experience in the killing of Sandino in Nicaragua, and that particular order has been transformed into a brilliant movie here by one of our best authors called Revolución en el Infierno, which I recommend to anybody that has a CD, because you can ask for it at the Ateneo and it will show. The fascinating thing about that, Juan, is that its author took up the experience that his uncle told him, because his uncle was one of the wounded in the Ponce Massacre. So we have now a visual testimony of what happened that day that I recommend to all your listeners. It is really espeluznante.
I wanted to actually ask Juan Manuel to read from his book, Harvest of Empire, History of Latinos in America. Tell us who described this massacre, Juan.
Well, actually, I was born in Ponce, the city where the massacre occurred, and my family was from there. And so actually, as I was doing research on the book, I started interviewing my own family members, who it turned out one of my aunts, Graciela Ramos, who just recently passed away, was a nationalist at the time, was dating one of the nationalist cadets who was supposed to participate in the protest that day. But he decided instead to go on a picnic with my aunt, who was 16 at the time. And so both my aunts, a younger one who was just a little girl at the time, described to me what happened that day. And I have about a graph or two in my book on it. And the day was Palm Sunday, March 21st, 1937. My Aunt Graciela was 16 and caught up in the nationalist fervor at the time. Luckily, she decided to skip the march that day and go on a picnic with her sisters, Ana and Pura. They all trekked up to El Vigía, the magnificent hilltop estate of the Serrayes family, owners of the Don Q rum distillery. From the rolling castle grounds, you can look down on all of Ponce. Pura, who was a child at the time, recalls that shortly after the nationalists gathered, the church bells began to ring, and when she looked down the mountain toward the plaza, she saw people scattering in all directions. A young woman they knew ran up to them screaming, "There's a massacre in the town. The nationalists and the soldiers are fighting. The hospital is full of wounded." When the smoke had cleared, 21 were dead and 150 were wounded. A Human Rights Commission would later report that all had been gunned down by the police. It was the biggest massacre in Puerto Rico history. After the Palm Sunday massacre, hysteria and near civil war swept the island. Nationalists were hunted and arrested on sight. Some headed for exile in New York City or Havana. Graciela, our family's only Nationalist Party member, decided there was nothing that could be won by the fighting the Americans. With Albizu in jail and the Nationalist ranks decimated, she abandoned the party. And of course, then, within a few years, most of my family then came to the United States. So it was clearly
Although they were part of the United States.
Yes, but to the continental United States, and clearly it was a seminal event in Puerto Rico and had enormous impact on the independence movement.